In this video, I want to look at some of my attacks I did against the legendary 4 Rogal Dorn tank with the Custodes team, 3 attacks in total, and I'm going to be just examining how I developed my strategy against it as I moved forward. Now this is my first attempt at fighting the tank. I haven't started at the beginning because I start it very much the same way as I start, well, very similarly to the way I start my next 2 attacks, so I didn't really want to be too repetitious, but the most pertinent thing here is that on this run I decided to lure the tank towards the top portion of the map in this turn, which turned out to be a mistake. Forgive me for that. I haven't used Khan or multi-hit type characters against this boss in a very long time, so it's a bit of a rookie mistake to make, but the mistake here is that the tank gets to move forward 3 hexes to occupy this space, which means that Khan, his passive ability that causes him to attack before the summons, that can only move him forward 2 hexes towards an enemy. So what will happen in the next turn is Khan won't be able to move towards the Rogal Dorn tank and hit it. So instead what he'll do is hit a nearby ally instead, and as you can see all of my allies are pretty significantly injured here, so that is not going to be any good. So now I've got the decision to make of what to do about all this, and this situation just makes things very complicated. What I eventually decided on doing before I started moving my characters around was that I was going to leave Khan at least 2 hexes away from any other characters, and then put a spore mine next to him, so at the beginning of the next turn he always, with his passive ability, if he attacks a friendly, he'll attack one that's adjacent to him without moving. He won't move and attack another friendly in that situation, so I was going to just make sure that he killed the spore mine to keep the rest of my characters safe, but that meant that if I wanted him to hit the rear armor, I would only be able to hit the rear armor with 2 of my characters, because I'd need to leave 1 hex unoccupied to prevent him from carrying out any regrettable friendly fire incidents. So we'll just see how that all sort of shook out. So I move Khan there, so I'm going to be leaving this hex empty. Move Ragnar there because he really needs the chance to score a crit, otherwise he does no damage, whereas Karayan, I think I'm going to be moving him here, which, because most of his damage comes from his passive ability, which does 80% pierce, so I don't have to worry about the tank's triple armor if I don't hit it from the rear. So I've got Dante boosting everybody. Oh yeah, I also messed up the order of the active, so I had to use Khan's active there, which was a bit of a shame. Ideally I would have wanted to use Dante's active here to then use Khan's active afterwards, or save Khan's active for the final turn. But yeah, so I've got this all set out now. As you can see, it's not going to be brilliant. And then I just defaulted to where I put the spore mine when I'm using Admex, completely forgot to put it next to Khan, so he ended up killing Ragnar. So basically I just had a bit of a retard moment there, but it is what it is. This run wasn't particularly great anyway, so I wasn't too fussed at this point about it going a bit wrong. Yeah, I didn't end up doing too horrifically here, but there was much to be improved, so I'll pause now and then shift on to the next replay. So this is the second replay of my fights against the Rogal Dorn tank. This one went the best in terms of damage dealt out of all of them, although it was still riddled with mistakes and there's a lot to be improved. But I think of all things, I'm fairly happy with the starting positions of my characters, so just go over that. We've got Khan on the left to kill the left-hand guardsman and get his passive online as quickly as possible, so that he can then kill this guardsman and just generally free me from having to deal with the boss's ants. Got Karayan here, so he can attack this guardsman on the right, which will count towards stacking his active ability and the increased percentage of damage that his attacks deal from that after he uses his active ability. Now I want Trajan on the right hand side of the map to potentially deal with this mortar team, and so I'll just be luring the tank to the right. Seems like the best choice here. If I lure it to the right, I'll be able to hit it in the rear armor in the second turn with Khan, and Ragnar and Dante. Whereas if I lure it to the left, I won't be able to hit it in the rear armor with Khan, but I will be able to hit it with Karayan. So in the second turn, it's just a toss-up between whether you want to be able to hit it in the rear armor with Karayan or Ragnar. Karayan or Khan. Now, I prefer to have Khan hit it in the rear armor because most of Karayan's damage comes from his passive ability, which does piercing damage, so it's not the end of the world if you don't hit the tank in the rear with that. Whereas if you don't hit the tank in the rear armor with Khan, and Khan will be dealing 8 hits against the rear armor of the tank in the next turn. If you don't hit it in the rear armor, he only does 50% pierce, so he encounters the tripled armor of the tank, which really puts a dent in his damage output. So on the balance of things, I prefer to have Khan free to hit the back of the tank rather than Karayan. So with all that said and done, let's get on with starting the replay. So starting positions, deselect that. So I get Dante's boost on Karayan just to make sure he gets overkill on that guardsman. Didn't get the mortar to flee, but with the strategy that I'm using, that won't be a problem. I put Trajan here. Now this is good because at the start of the next turn, the tank will move into this space, which means that Trajan will be adjacent to it. That means that I can use his passive ability and the extra hits it provides with all of my other characters, and then potentially move Trajan somewhere else if necessary. If Trajan didn't start the turn adjacent to the tank, I'd have to move him adjacent to it to get to apply his bonus hits to Khan and Karayan. Whereas instead, I might want to actually move him to kill this mortar team. Of course, if I move him, if he doesn't start the turn adjacent to the tank, and I move him towards the mortar team, there'll be no point during that turn where he'll be adjacent to the tank, so I won't be able to make use of the extra hits on Karayan and Khan. So that's no good. I want to avoid that. Now Ragnar, I move him into this position. It won't change the direction of the tank, it will still face down and to the right. But by putting him here, I'll be able to hit its rear armor with him at the start of the next turn. And then obviously with Khan, just kill that dude. And this spore mine here, it will attract fire from this mortar team, and I've left space around it so that no one will be potentially suppressed by the mortar team's fire when it attacks the spore mine. So that's one guardsman dealt with. Unfortunately, these two are outside of the tank's gunner's kill on sight area of effect, so I can't trigger that just to kill them. So I'm going to have to handle them in some way or another. Now what happens here is what I think is probably my first mistake of the major mistake of the battle. So what I do is move Dante before I move Karayan and Ragnar. As it turned out, over the course of this battle, my Dante didn't actually take a great deal of damage. My Karayan and my Ragnar were in the line of fire of the tank a lot more than he was. So what I really should have done here was just moved Dante last, just to get Ragnar and Karayan out of the area of effect of the tank's gunner's kill on sight ability as quickly as possible to minimize the number of times they were hit by it. So what I really should have done was move Karayan first, then Ragnar, and then finally Dante into their final positions. Yeah, I got to shut down the tank's overwatch, so now at least I can move Karayan without him being shot again. Now there, what I decided to do was to attack the guardsman with Karayan. And the reason I did that is because his normal attack only does 40% pierce, so even with Ragnar's Warhowl, there's a decent chance that he won't crit against the tank's side armor, and therefore he will be subjected to its tripled armor stat, which means that his normal attack won't do very much. Even if it were to crit, his normal attack still doesn't do a huge amount of damage anyway, so I was happy to spend it just killing that guardsman, getting an overkill, potentially causing this mortar team to flee. Because if I can get that mortar team to flee that way, I can then attack the tank with Trajan. Instead, I have to divert Trajan away to attack the mortar team. But of course, it's fine to divert Trajan away because he is adjacent to the tank here, so I can attack with all of my other characters, so I've attacked with Khan, Ragnar, Dante and Karian. So now I'm free to move Trajan away. He's not applying his extra hits buff against the tank anymore, but that doesn't matter. And he can kill that mortar team and stop it from suppressing the rest of my characters. Now this is one of the reasons why I wanted to use Custodes here rather than AdMech, is because this strategy is very dependable for dealing with these ads. AdMech, there is a lot of RNG variation depending on whether Tan's able to kill certain enemies in one hit or not, and then whether his Skitari can kill them in one attack or not, or whether they flee from having enemies killed next to them or overkilled next to them. But using the Custodes here, it basically eliminates all of that RNG variation, and all that you really have to worry about is potentially diverting an attack from Karian and maybe one from Trajan to finish them off, which isn't much of a big deal in the grand scheme of things. It's nowhere near as much of a big deal as when you're using the AdMechs and you might have your Skitari running all over the place getting distracted for God knows how long unless you get them under control. So that's just something that makes this a little bit easier. So now I can use Karian's active on the tank. It's the third turn, so it's the optimal time to use his first active ability. And Khan and Karian are currently within Dante's buff range, so I can attack with both of them. Now if I move Ragnar to the rear of the tank, he is outside of Dante's buff range, so I'll just move Dante now to apply his buff to Ragnar. And now this is an opportunity for me. So Dante, his passive ability, gives surrounding characters with Rapid Assault or the Flying trait an extra hit on their attacks if they are at or below 50% health. So what I'm going to do here is get them all injured via Gunner's Kill on sight, so that he is able to confer those extra hits to them. Also, the aim of the game here will be, instead of to lure the tank up into this space, I want to lure it down and to the left hand side of the map, so it ultimately moves into this space instead, which means I'll avoid the situation I had with Khan where he ended up not being able to passively attack the tank in the final turn and killed Ragnar, so which was a bit of a faff to deal with, so this should go a lot more smoothly. Now again, potentially a mistake moving Dante that early because he had plenty of health and he only was going to be hit once. I didn't move him so that he could hit the rear armor. What I wanted to do instead was move Karian into this space so that Dante's passive ability would be giving him an extra hit. At this point, I'm not sure if it was actually worth doing that, and I might change this up in the future. Just live with the fact that Karian won't be getting his extra hit from Dante, but I'll be able to hit the tank in the rear armor with Dante this turn, which will give him a good chance of getting a meaty crit chain against it. And it also means that instead of moving Ragnar to where I end up moving him, which I'll just demonstrate that now, over there, I might be able to move him to where Dante is instead. So at the start of the next turn, what I'll be able to do is charge with Ragnar when he's attacking the rear armor of the tank, which will give him a bit of bonus damage from his passive ability and also 3 extra hits. So on the balance of things, I think Dante being able to hit the tank in the rear armor in this turn, and Ragnar being able to hit with 3 extra hits in the next turn outweighs the benefit I get from getting an extra hit on Karian via his passive ability on this turn. So that's something I will need to change. I was also dissatisfied with having to move Trajan in this turn. What I should have done at the end of the next turn was just put him in this trench, so that I then didn't have to move him over to get him out of the way of Ragnar. By having to move him, that just meant that I subjected my characters to being damaged an extra time when it wasn't strictly necessary. And you can already see that they are plenty low enough on health, I don't need them to be injured anymore. And I was lucky here to get a crit, which then meant that I could escape taking too much more damage with Karian here. But this could have potentially gone very badly if Karian had taken any more damage, so I was very dissatisfied with how this went. again, that's the reason for me saying that I shouldn't have. I should have started with Trajan in this trench just to minimise the hits that Karian, Khan and Ragnar were taking. But yeah, I fire the Spore Mine there. So that lures the tank to facing to the southwest rather than turning to the north. I think the Spore Mine I put here on the previous turn to try and lure it to face this way wasn't strictly necessary. I think as long as I had the Spore Mine here, the tank would have turned to the southwest rather than the north, regardless of whether there was one over this way. And the advantage to that would have been was that the Spore Mine I put here, it wouldn't have moved before exploding, which meant that I wouldn't have triggered Gunner's Kill on sight from the tank, which would have meant that Karian would have taken one less hit from that ability. So over the course of this battle, I've already taken a lot of extra hits that I strictly didn't need to take with Karian, and he's already on very low health. Now, he's not as highly upgraded as he potentially could be, but again, I put him in way too much danger, and I could have easily cut down on all that without putting a crimp on any of my damage output, so that's something I definitely should have thought about. However, for now, I'll just be focusing on getting as much damage on as possible on the tank. So I don't want to use Khan's active ability to trigger Trajan's passive, because Khan's active ability is best used after another character has used their active ability, because that gives his piercing hit of his active 3 hits, which does a hell of a lot of damage. And if you get the extra hit from Dante on him as well, then that's even more destructive. Now I kind of failed here because I didn't get Khan below half health. If I had Karian and Ragnar less injured, I would have been able to get him hit more by Gunner's Kill on sight more comfortably to give him those extra hits. So that's another kind of mistake I made here in terms of letting my Ragnar and Karian get too heavily injured. It's another thing to improve on. Now I've still got Dante's active ability to use. Now I assumed here that he'd probably move to the nearest hex, all other things being equal, when he's attacking the tank with this ability. So what I'm going to do is prevent him from moving onto this hex with Trajan by moving Trajan here. So now when he uses his active, he is boosting Khan and Karian. I moved Khan, Ragnar and Karian to these spaces before I did anything with Dante, because I assumed that if I used Dante's active ability and there was a space free at the rear of the tank, he'd probably move into that area instead, because the AI does tend to prioritize moving into that area if possible. So just wanted to prevent him from doing that and blocking one of my main damage dealers from being able to hit the rear armor of the tank. So no worries about Khan hitting my teammates this time, because the tanks only move for 2 hexes, and now I can just wail on the boss a little bit to finish this off. Again, making sure I cover everyone with Dante's passive ability, and I end up on a fairly decent score, although it definitely could be improved, and my method could be improved significantly. So I'll pause here and then give some final thoughts on my third replay. And this is my third replay, and I've just started where things begin to differ from my previous one. So here, I will move Ragnar and then Karian before I move Dante, because I know Dante can take the extra hits no problem. And that leaves my Karian and Ragnar less injured by the tank's abilities. Now, again, even though I think I did better here, I still made a mistake. Because Karian has less health, he only has 7,800 as opposed to Ragnar's 9,100. What I really should have done was move Karian first. Now, this issue is also compounded by the fact that in the penultimate turn, When the tank is facing to the southwest, Karayan is the only one of my characters that gets hit by the gunner's kill on sight ability. So that means that over the course of the fight, Karayan actually takes more hits than Ragnar does. So really what I should have done here was just ensure that Karayan took as few hits as possible and not worried about moving Ragnar first. So that again, even though I improved this, it's another improvement I could make on top of that improvement. So I'm going to pause and then move on to the next thing. So this is the end of the second turn, and as you can see, I've moved Trajan not onto this hex, but into the trench here, which means that I won't have to shift him out of the way of my other characters in the next turn and trigger Gunner's kill on sight by moving Trajan, which will keep him a little bit safer. Now you'll see why it's so important that I minimise the damage on Karayan and Ragnar. So this time I did move Dante first because I was actually concerned that if he took 2 hits from the Overwatch he might die, so I only wanted him to take 1. Now what I was doing there was trying to get Khan under 50% health so that he was getting the bonus hit from Dante's passive, but in the process of doing so I really got Karayan and Ragnar badly injured. So again, this just shows the importance of conserving health, especially on Karayan. Ragnar not so much, so definitely need to look out for him and try not to get him injured so much as I did in the second turn, for example, and also not leave him in as much danger as I do at the start of the next turn. And you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. But yeah, at least I'm getting those extra hits from Dante's passive, so that's alright, I suppose. Now the really big issue here is that Karayan has now been reduced to 1 health, so if I try and move him onto this hex to prevent Dante from moving there when he uses his passive, well, he's just going to be killed by the Overwatch. And I don't want to start attacking with my other characters to switch off the tank's Overwatch before I've got Trajan's debuff on it. So I can't start attacking with them before I use Dante's active ability. So this has left me in a bit of a bind. What I really should have done was not spawn a spore mine around here. I should have just, as I said before, spawned the one on this hex to hit the tank, to lure the tank to face to the southwest, but not cause it to fire its gunner's kill on sight. And if that had happened, then I would have been able to move Karayan safely out of this area over here to hit the tank in the rear armor, but instead this goes quite badly. This also opens up a point that I want to make as well about using the Biovore here. Now if I use the Biovore properly, there are essentially 4 turns in this battle where I can use the Biovore's passive ability to hit the tank and cause it to take damage, assuming I had its passive ability upgraded high enough. Now if I had my Biovore at Mythic, every time it hit the boss and the Mythic ability was maxed out, that would cause the Biovore to apply a 20% extra damage taken debuff to the tank. Having that active on 4 out of the 5 turns when I'm attacking the tank would give a significant boost to my damage. So this is definitely a case where having the Biovore leveled up would give a really, really big increase to your damage output in a fight. So that is something to think about. Just in general terms, it can be very effective. So now I use Dante's active, which unfortunately puts him in the most viable position in terms of how the AI likes to position itself, which is in the rear armor arc of the tank, which blocks Karayan's way to that point. But now I can just hit the rear armor with Ragnar and Khan and drop the Overwatch. And perfect opportunity to use Khan's active because he's at less than half health and someone's already used their active ability, so he's got 4 hits on his initial attack with the piercing damage, so that does quite a lot of damage. And now I can attack with Trajan and then just move Karayan in to at least get the extra hit from Dante on his passive. and his normal attack, but that does about 3 damage, so who cares. And again, you can see there that there's another opportunity to hit the tank with the Biovor's Spore Mine, so that is very good if you have its mythic ability unlocked. Of course, because the tank has only moved 2 hexes, I'm not in any danger of Khan killing any of his teammates. So Khan's just gone and done an attack which is still boosted by Dante, so that's very nice. That's just a case of sequencing everything, so I'll make sure Dante gets his buff on everyone, and of course Trajan does as well. Use Korion's active to do a good chunk of damage. Khan's turn, then reposition Dante. And finally Ragnar can deliver the finishing hit. So that ends up on 641k damage, which is less damage than I actually did on my previous attempts, but I think I had quite bad luck with crits here. You didn't get to see all of the times where they missed crits on the rear armour, but it was quite a lot. So I think this has potential to be a lot better, the strategy, in terms of the damage output just from RNG variation, but also there are lots of little issues with it that still need to be ironed out. So what I'm going to do now is go through the replay and just flag up all of the points at which I should have done something different, so that if you want to copy this and work on it yourself, that'll be just handy for you to have those improvements so you can make them yourself. First thing to improve on here, I should have moved Corion first instead of Ragnar. So you can see that due to me not moving Corion first, he takes an extra hit from the Overwatch. Quite a few things wrong with this picture, so first of all, I shouldn't have spawned this Spore Mine here at all. If anything, I probably should spawn it here so that at the start of the turn it flies forwards and hits the tank, and therefore if you do have a mythic Biovore, you can enjoy the extra damage boost you get from that happening. That's not where it ends, so I think I would change up the positioning of my characters here entirely from what I end up doing. So first of all, I move Dante there. What I think I should do instead is move him here to attack the rear armor of the boss, and I can do that as soon as possible to try and get crits, or get 1 crit, depending on whether Khan critted with his passive ability. You don't want to shut off the Overwatch too soon, but yeah, don't want it running on for too long either and dealing unnecessarily high levels of damage to your characters. So instead of moving Ragnar there, I would move him to where Dante is currently standing, so I can make use of his extra hits on a charge in the next turn. Instead of moving Corion there, I would move him where Ragnar currently is, because he doesn't have to worry about the extra hits on the charge, and that will allow him to move on to this hex in the next turn and hit the boss in the rear armor, and then Khan can move on to this hex and Ragnar can move on to the final rear armor hex. Finally, with Khan, I would do the same thing that I do here. I would move him onto this hex so he can benefit from Dante's passive when Dante is standing here. Yep, so that's what I change about this situation. So with the changes I've made, Corion will be able to stand here, Khan will be able to go here, Ragnar will be able to go here, and then you could use Dante's active after moving Trajan onto this hex, and that should give you optimal damage output for this turn. I just paused there, but actually that was all I had to say on this topic, so hopefully this was maybe a bit interesting, perhaps useful. I'm looking forward to improving on my strategies the next time we're facing this boss, but we have cleared it now, so I won't be able to share any further improvements for a while, so it'll be up to you to make them if you decide that this is something that's worthy of copying or improving on yourself.